Okay, 2 kids game reviews in a row. In last episode's installment of What the Heck Am I Even Doing, I played as an elephant, a rhino, something on the Mega Drive. Today, we're instead going for a naughty doggo who's susceptible to rambling inner monologues. Released in 2003 and only on the PlayStation 2, it was developed by Frontier Developments, who are notable for the Roller Coaster Tycoon and Elite franchises. There aren't really a lot of games out there that let you play as a dog, but the lure of adventure, open world environments, and smells did pique my interest. Marketed as GTA for dogs at E3 2004, and that's an exact quote, this unique undertaking is also a budget game. So let's find out which corners in development were cut. You play as a dog named Jake, who, on living an idealistic life in the countryside, witnesses dog nappers kidnapping his crush, Daisy. This literal horn dog then takes it upon himself to rescue the love of his life, traversing through the countryside, over a snowing mountain, and eventually into a city. It should be noted that no one can actually understand Jake, not even other dogs. He is ultimately talking to himself throughout the game. Fortunately, he can understand English, so on overhearing conversations from humans, who are portrayed as baboons, he picks up the trail of where and why Daisy has been kidnapped.
That's where those creeps took Daisy.
Spoiler alert, and seriously, don't get edgy at me for spoiling a kid's game from 2003. The mastermind to Daisy and other dogs' kidnapping is an owner of a cat food company, so you can probably guess what she's using the dogs for. The moniker GTA for dogs is used for a reason. Jake runs around a fairly large environment, although it's not exactly open world. It's a semi-open world in a corridor fashion, if that makes sense. You can't easily travel from one part that's far from another in a straight line as such, as each section is laid out in a series of connecting nodes. You can travel between these nodes at will, however, and there's a variety of things to do and see. Your time will be split between taking quests from the stupid humans, versing other dogs in minigames, and exploring the smells of the world to collect as many bones as possible. You're given the choice of playing in third or first person, with each having their distinct pros and cons. The third person mode uses tank controls, which isn't as much of a disadvantage as you'd expect, but the platforming sections are reasonably horrible. Luckily, these don't show up much, but lining yourself up and jumping can be a chore. Jake also has a lunge that's as powerful as a million suns, so it can be easy to overshoot the jump if you're not careful. You can also pick items up and throw them while in third person, but again, you'll be faced with the same rigid lining up mechanic. Last, on the topic of being in the third person, like a lot of 3D games from the era, especially budget titles, there is a fair amount of clipping if you're in tight surrounds. Luckily, this is remedied by switching into the first person mode. In first person, tank controls are done away with, but you also have access to Dog's life's biggest gameplay mechanic, smell-o-vision. If you've ever encountered a dog, which is unlikely I know, you'll notice that the lovable scamps love giving things a good whiff. Dogs have a great sense of smell, and the developers use this fact to their advantage. In first person, there is an entirely different layer to the world that was previously unseen. Displayed as colour-coded wisps of smoke, Jake collects these to unlock minigames with other dogs, and most importantly, find bones. Jake can also use his nose to seek out things like footprints if he's trying to retrace someone's steps. While the core missions you do for people usually result in a bone as a reward, you'll spend a lot of time exploring the environment to find a set number of coloured smells. Because of this, you'll spend most of the game in first person. The missions for people are usually nothing more than fetch quests, which is apt for a dog I guess, but each level will have another dog hanging around. Collect enough of a dog's corresponding smells, and you'll get a chance to verse it in a minigame. These involve a game of Simon Says, where you copy a set sequence of button pushes in a time limit, a game where the aim is to dig more holes down a set path, another where you try to mark more territory than your foe, a race where you try to eat more than a competing dog, and lastly, a simple game of tag that never took me more than 10 seconds to win. Your prize for winning these games? Well, a bone. But you can then straight up control that dog for a limited amount of time. Sometimes this is pretty useless since you can't go into first person mode and you'll always end up back as Jake after a few minutes anyway. But several have certain skills that are out of Jake's scope. A smaller dog can, of course, be used to get into areas that Jake is too big for. Another good example is a greyhound since they're so quick. While most of your time will be spent searching for complete collections of smells and helping humans with their various woes, there are a few other aspects of the world to note. During the Simon Says games, for instance, you learn some moves which can then be used to hassle the local populace into giving you treats.
Have you no self-respect?
There is an element of danger with scamping around, however, as there is a dog catcher and its traitor dog that you must avoid. On every encounter with them, you must escape the traitor dog or you'll have to bribe it with one of your special bones. The dog will just bury it anyway so you can then sniff it out, but it's at this point you're probably wondering what the deal with bones is. Well, dogs like bones. I can tell you that from experience. I had a dog once and it was very happy when I gave it bones. But in this game, they're used mostly as a symbol of progression. You can't verse dogs in minigames until you have more bones than them, for instance. And also, just on the down low, you'll need 91 of the 125 total bones to play the final level. So make sure you're on track once you get to the city. Otherwise, there is a very obvious sponsorship with the dog food brand, Pedigree. There is pedigree stuff plastered everywhere, which is kind of ironic since the storyline of the game is so central to a large evil cat food company, which you rarely see any mention of. Regardless, a check is a check for a budget game, I'm sure. On the plus side, there are pedigree branded shops around that give Jake a good scrub, since just like a real dog, he's incredibly efficient at getting filthy. There's also a health system to consider, but since this is a kids game, it's very easy going. It's very hard to outright kill Jake. You can't get run over by the cars, believe me I tried, but on one occasion I was squished by a boulder. That was fairly light-hearted compared to the other time I died, which was when I was shot dead by a criminal, so that's a bit dark.
What? Hey, stop!
Whoa, how'd I end up here?
Neither time hindered my progress, however, since he simply respawns very closely to where he ate it. There are an infinite amount of lives too. There isn't any way to get attacked either, except for one time where I got scratched in the face by a kitten, so the only real way you can lose health is by falling from high places. Even then, he'll just move around a bit slower, and this is solved by eating something. So yes, this game was developed on a budget, and while the graphics and sound can seem a bit pudgy, the game doesn't seem overtly cheap, although there are a few clues. For one, there is a mission where you retrieve a girl's lost jacket. On returning it, she makes you turn around while she puts it on because of what her mum told her about changing clothes in front of people or something like that. I read this specific example is because the dev team didn't have the resources to animate her putting it on, so a gag is put in place to bypass it. The biggest indicator of its budget nature, however, is a man named Kerry Shale. Shale is a big enough actor to have his own Wikipedia page, although not big enough to have one with a photo, but in Dog's Life, he provides his voice for a whopping 32 characters. Talk about stretched resources, although this could be a labour of love since he's also credited as being a writer on the game. Regardless, the effort earned him a place in the 2009 edition of the Guinness World Records Gamers Edition for the most voiceovers by one person in a single game. Speaking of the graphics, it's all a bit basic and it's questionable if they were going for a cartoony look or not, but it gets the job done. Each section has its distinct look, and I couldn't see too much repetition with the assets used. The on-screen HUD is also delightfully uncluttered. In fact, there won't be anything on screen at all in the third-person mode unless it's indicating a button to push. The animation of the dogs looks realistic too, which I consider important in a game all about the species. At the start of the game, there was even some nice CGI for a cutscene, although it appears all the resources were put into that single clip because further scenes were completely PS2 era spec. It showcases the humour a little bit though, which is prevalent throughout the game. It's nice the game is light-hearted, but be prepared for toilet humour.
You kids today make me sick.
While the voice acting is passable, even if the scripting leaves a bit to be desired, the music was annoying. While not offensive individually, The tunes were basic and repetitive and did drone on after a while. The melodies sort of sound like something that is copyright free, thanks to the very music I use in these videos from the YouTube audio library. No offense to any of that, but it serves a purpose as listenable background noise while you focus on whatever I'm rambling about. In a game so focused on exploration, you'll be listening to it and nothing else, so its downfalls do stand out a bit more. Dog's Life is okay for what it ultimately is, a kid's game. It is easy, but the concept and gameplay should be commended for trying to do something different. I played plenty of trash video games as a kid, and even then I found it offensive that they were aimed at me. There's a fun novelty to exploring around as a good doggo and smelling everything. Even though Dog's Life obviously has its pitfalls, it hits the right balance of a good concept that everyone can play.